Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tarek O'Dali from Business Review, and I will be your host. It is our pleasure to have Malvern Instruments with us today, who'll be presenting this webinar titled Turning Up the Heat on Protein Stability Characterization. Today's guest speaker is Dr. Ronan O'Brien, Head of Business Development, Malvern MicroCal. I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar platform On24. You'll notice this webinar is fully browser-based, so if you do disconnect for any reason, simply click on the link you received via email and you'll be able to rejoin the session. In order to ask questions, you can send them in at any time throughout the session via the questions widget. Just type them into the box at the top left-hand corner of your screen and click submit. We'll try to allocate some time at the end of the session to address any of the questions or thoughts that you may have. If you click on the green resource list widget at the bottom of your screen, you'll find some PDF files and some links which are relevant to this webinar, so feel free to view or download those throughout the session. And please use the yellow help widget if you do require technical assistance. You're also free to move, resize, and maximize any of the windows in front of you in order to get a better view of the slides. But now, without any further ado, please allow me to welcome today's speaker, Ronan. Ronan, over to you.
Thank you, Tarek, and thank you all for coming and joining us on this, for me, an exciting webinar to introduce our new technology. So, for those of you who are perhaps unfamiliar with DSC, I just want to introduce that technology very briefly. That is the product we are launching today. So, just as a background, DSC measures directly the heat absorbed during a protein unfolding process. So, all those any hydrogen bonds that get broken, there's a heat change associated with that, and the calorimeter can pick up those tiny heat changes that occur. And because hydrogen bonds are broken during any protein unfolding or antibody unfolding process, it's a universal detector, and it can look at the stability of any protein or indeed any macromolecule of interest. One of the beauties of the technology is because of this universal nature, there is no need for dyes or a specific spectroscopic probe to monitor the unfolding process. It's a sort of holistic device that can see the unfolding of all parts of that protein. And as you can see here from this slide, and this is not something written by me but by our user base, it's often considered the gold standard for characterization of protein thermal stability. So it's a universal technology, and that's something very important for you to remember. I mean, very briefly, again, for those of you experienced in this field, this is nothing new, but for those of you who are new to this area, this is the output you get from a DSC, or a differential scanning calorimeter. The thermogram, as you can see on the left, occurs when a simple small protein unfolds. So on the left-hand side, you see this sort of purple wiggly thing, and that represents a native folded protein. When you heat it up, that protein becomes unfolded at the higher temperatures. That unfolding process induces an absorption of heat, which the calorimeter detects. On the right-hand side, you see some of the parameters that you can derive from the thermogram. The most informative piece of information from this is the TM, and that's the sort of the midpoint you can see here, the top of the peak, and that's used as for comparing the stability of proteins. The area under the curve is the enthalpy, which is the sort of amount of heat absorbed by the molecule as it unfolds. And for those of you interested in detailed thermodynamic analysis, this can be used for looking at the stabilizing forces and understanding the sort of non-covalent interactions that occur and stabilize the protein. Again, the thermodynamicists amongst you will also be aware of the delta Cp that can be determined from this data, but that's not going to be the focus of this presentation. Okay, so why would you use a DSC? And it's because it's a universal biotherapeutic stability platform because of this ability to measure the unfolding of all proteins and all antibodies that you may be wanting to study. So in this picture here, you see two DSC traces, one with a higher TM than the other. Now, if you have an increase in TM, correlates well with the increased shelf life of a biologic, and also the developability of that biotherapeutic candidate. So it's a very simple technology, but can be very informative. So, for instance, if you have two proteins in the same buffer and you want to compare the stability, you would choose the one with the highest TM because it had a higher potential to survive your R&D and your manufacturing efforts going on. If you have the same the same protein in two different buffer or formulation conditions, again you would choose those conditions that increase the one that had the higher TM, because again that's a good indicator that this will be a better protein or system for you to work on going forward. So now, just to show you the sort of the importance of this technology and how well recognized it is. This is a document that you don't have to read this all by any means, but it's the World Health Organization document recommending to the regulatory authorities that DSC should be used when you want to monitor the quality, safety, and efficacy of your biotherapeutic protein products. So this is something that's well recognized even by the health organizations and the regulatory agencies, and that's, I think, important for you to realize. So again, just supporting the value of this technology in this space, here are some customer quotes that we have. One here very nicely saying DSC is likely the strongest, most informative and relevant of all the biophysical methods currently available. And again, underneath we have something that's another comment that's equally effusive, should I say, talking about the value of this technology in the biopharm industry. So where does it fit in? Where does DSC fit in the biotherapeutic development pipeline? And here you've all probably seen variations on this picture. This is a version you probably recognize. We start on the left-hand side with trying to identify targets and also proteins that interact with those targets, all the way through to taking our candidates, making sure we got good candidates, putting them into buffers that stabilize them in pre-formulation, and then through to process development where people are trying to find conditions which the candidate will survive when going through the manufacturing process. There's a latter stage formulations and also biosimilarity now, which is DSC has been very broadly taken up in that area, and then all the way through to manufacturing. So in this whole pipeline, there is a need to know how stable your protein is. And so DSC, you can see by this thin blue line at the top of the page, is well represented in all of these technologies because of this ability to detect stable proteins through to process developers finding manufacturing. You want to find conditions where you purify your protein which don't destabilize it so you can maximize your yields. And then at these sort of latter stages in biosimilarity and manufacturing, it's used more as a fingerprinting type technique where you want to make sure that the thermogram or the DSC trace you see is the same, even if you've gone through process changes or batch-to-batch comparisons. The point behind this presentation really is to show you how the new MicroCal PEAQ-DSC fits better in that space that DSC currently is used, but also to show you that it now can be extended into the manufacturing condition situation because of new features which allow it to be used in a GXP environment. I think that will be very interesting to many of you. So I'll just now that I've introduced DSC, what the technology is and where it sits in the biopharm industry, I will just show you a brief clip, a brief video introducing the technology. And then after that, I will go through some of the new features and how they can be applied in your workflow. So I'll just play a short video. Hopefully you'll enjoy this, and then at the end I'll come back and continue the presentation. Hi. So I hope you enjoyed that. It's quite entertaining. So let's get down into the sort of the details of the new product. So here's our automated version, the MicroCal PEAQ-DSC automated instrument. This instrument can run 288 samples unattended. It has lots of great new software features and hardware improvements that I'm very excited to tell you about. In addition, we have the manual version of that for those of you whose requirements or application requirements are lower throughput. And we have a very nice version that includes all the same software features of the automated product, however without the automation, which it does fit some of our customers' needs. So what's new? Right, here's what I want you to trying to use these 4 cornerstones to get over the value that I think this product will bring you. We have these 4 major areas: peak compliance, peak performance, peak smart, and peak compare. I will now go through each of these various of these cornerstones and describe them all in more detail. But just as an overview, what do each of these areas give you? So peak compliance gives you data integrity. This instrument has now features that support 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, allowing it to be used in a GXP environment. It allows managers and experts to control the types of analysis and the experiments that people in your teams can use. We have peak performance, which I will demonstrate to you will increase your productivity by a few-fold. There's also peak smart, and a very invaluable set of tools which allow analysis and method transfer between people, departments, and across sites. And then we have peak compare, a new tool for robust comparability decision making. So this provides tools for quantifying in a more robust way either your biosimilars versus an innovator, or for your batch-to-batch comparability in your manufacturing and manufacturing support applications. So peak compliance, the first of these 4 cornerstones. So this table summarizes the new features that support the new compliance, the ability to work in a GXP environment. This instrument comes with the Malvern Access Controller, or MAC, and this allows a manager to control access to certain features, both experimental setup and analysis. We have a report designer, which allows you to build reports and make report templates so that any further or any future experiments you do can be presented in the same way that you and your company and your peers and your managers like to see, in a consistent way. There's even a little place in there that you can put your own company logo. Some nice little features like that. Perhaps very importantly, there's also the ability to add an electronic signature to those reports, meaning that the data you now generate fulfill some of the regulatory requirements for 21 CFR Part 11 and Annex 11 compliance. The new instrument is actually also completely networkable, making your company and your teams able to keep their data safe using your own internal system. So this feature provides that extra security that comes with centralized data storage, and you have a good data integrity. So to talk a little bit more specifically about those features, here's a GUI showing the Malvern Access Controller, or MAC, and this you enter a key and it allows access to certain individuals to certain elements of the software. We have here on the left is an example of a report designer that you might display, where you would display your data. This contains metadata and all the relevant information around the data and the person who ran it. It also has the ability, as you can see here on the right, to sign off electronically any changes that you may make to the data. So in support of this, we know this is new to us, so we have some documents on the website, the Malvern website, that hopefully you'll find very useful. As many of you are aware, being compliant is a complex thing, and some of the responsibility to show that compliance is with the vendor, us, but some is also with the user, you. And this document describes how we help the user support their own responsibilities towards compliance, but it also shows how we support how we support that process too. So these documents I hope you find very useful and can be found on the website, showing how we fit into that environment. So now I'll go on to peak performance, one of the other cornerstones that I mentioned. These features improve productivity and help build stronger protein drug characterization submissions. There's an automatic warm-up feature, so the instrument, those of you who've used it realize that you have to go through a warm-up process, and sometimes you have that process go on for longer than perhaps needed just to ensure that the instrument is performing optimally. That can now be detected by the instrument itself, so it will start running your experiments as soon as it's warm. So that saves as soon as it's performing optimally, so saving you a lot of time. We have a reference sample check. So this allows you in a workflow to intermittently place reference samples, which are then automatically analyzed throughout the experiment, making sure that the instrument is performing appropriately. You have options there if for any reason it's not, where it can re-clean and restart, and also there is the ability to, you can ask the instrument to send you an email letting you know that it needs your attention. Again, these features save a lot of time and sample, and I hope you will find those very useful. I believe you will. There's the automatic analysis feature, which works with the reference checker and with all your data analysis, and I'll explain that a little bit more in detail. There are some changes to the hardware which have resulted in more efficient cleaning, and for certain applications we can increase the productivity by at least 65%. In some places we've actually shown that productivity can increase fourfold, and I will give you some examples of those later on. There's more robust needle seal, so there's some minor maintenance that needs to be done, and those are now more robust, reducing the time spent doing that. For those of you who, again, aware of the technology, we can now have more control over rescanning and downscanning, so you can do your reversibility studies. Also, there is a reduction in the sample consumption now. It's at 325 microliters. So I'll just dig into those a little bit just to show how these features can improve your productivity. So here on the left you see a GUI just showing the workflow that you can set up to put in your standard tests, your standard test samples. We can supply a protein, and we're happy to provide that you can use for these purposes. But perhaps many of you would like to actually use your own standard. And this example here on the right is actually the NIST mAb, commonly used now for looking at standardizing techniques studying antibodies. And you can set up the instrument to analyze these automatically, and then only progress if things are progressing well. We have new cleaning features, as I said earlier, and this means that and software controlled cleaning mechanisms, the combination of which allow for a far more efficient cleaning, meaning that we can spend less time on cleaning and checking up runs. So this is a key part to that increase in productivity when coupled to the reference checker. The GUI on the right is to demonstrate and to remind me to tell you about the email functionality, such that if for any reason your instrument needs your attendance, you can ask it to remind you using an email. PEAQ Smart, now, so the third cornerstone that I want to touch upon. This is about really value here is the consistency and the transferability of knowledge, methods, and data between people, departments, and sites. So here we have a number of features, including an experimental setup feature that allows you to set up a protocol in any way that you wish. It'll fit your workflow. It'll depend on how material comes to you, and you can set up your instruments in a very straightforward way. Those protocols can be saved, and you can be given administrative rights to certain individuals to make sure that everyone in your department runs experiments in exactly the same way, bringing consistency to your data. There are also, for the manual system, inbuilt videos to show you how to do each process, how to load an instrument. The automatic analysis feature, I think, will be very useful to many of you. So in many cases, even for complex data, the automatic analysis feature will allow completely non-subjective automated analysis. And even in those situations where you do need some expertise to analyze the data, the exact clicks that you went through to analyze that data can be stored and given to your peers so that when they analyze the same data, exactly the same analysis methods are being used. So this brings enormous strength to your comparability study. So everything will be done in exactly the same way. And I hope that this will actually, because this is provable and auditable, you can demonstrate this in any submissions you have to the regulatory agencies, giving them confidence of the integrity of your data. There's also a new algorithm for picking out subtle shoulders in PEAQ. So rather than having an expert guess, perhaps where a shoulder is an additional PEAQ, the software is very good now at picking up even subtle shoulders, allowing for sort of non-subjective identification of the stability of a subdomain. You may also be interested, because of this comparability and this fingerprinting nature of how the instrument is used, we now have some new specifications talking about inter-machine specifications, so you can feel confident that data generated on one instrument is comparable to data generated on another instrument, either at your site, a peer, or at another site in your company. So a little bit more detail on that. This is a GUI showing you the workflow. You can see it's a 96-well plate. It's just to remind me to let you know that you can put material wherever you want on this plate. It's very intuitive. You can interact with it with your mouse. It's just incredibly flexible. And again, once you've done these, set up these protocols, they're transferable to your team and across sites. In addition, this is just an example of the new PEAQ finder, the improved ability to pick out subdomains. So these three green lines you see that have picked out the various TMs have all been done automatically without any kind of user input. If you do feel that additional PEAQs are needed and your team have the expertise to make that decision, it's very easy to add another PEAQ and again to store that analysis so that any future experiments can be monitored or analyzed in the same way. DSC has always had an advantage over many technologies in being able to pick up these subdomains in multi-domain proteins. Some spectroscopic techniques find these very difficult, and this tool, I think, brings even a further advantage to this technology over some of those other methods. And this is just an example. I want to make that point that DSC is very good at picking up subdomains in multi-domain proteins. The data on the right is an antibody analyzed in various formulations and various buffers in a DSC, and you can see that these thermograms are information rich, and you can see lots of small multiple peaks so that the stability of various subdomains can be monitored. The same protein used in a spectroscopic technique, although you can see that the protein is unfolding, it can be quite difficult to pick up some of the details that you can observe in the DSC. Again, now just to sort of reinforce this ability to save methods. you could analyze many runs at once, which is a very powerful, and it speeds up the analysis. But once you've gone through this rather complex analysis, which many of these actually would be analyzed automatically, but again, even with some user input, you can record all the clicks and adjustments that you've had to make to analyze the data in the way that you feel is correct, and you can save those methods and actually hand them on to your peers and across sites to make sure of that transferability and comparability of data. PEAQ-Compare now, that leads on from what I was talking about with the PEAQ Smart. These tools are provided to help you in your fingerprinting analysis for your biosimilar versus innovator studies, but also for your batch-to-batch analysis that many of you do, that I know. So this is simultaneous analysis of multiple data sets, making sure that when you want to compare data, that they can all be analyzed at once, and there's no inter-run variability induced by just natural subjectivity that may be come from the user. There's now a new quantitative comparison tool. So many of you would have used TM as a way of comparing data sets, but now with this tool you can compare the TM and the heat under the curve, the area under the curve, or more formally the enthalpy. But also there's this new tool that compares the shape, and this looks at the subtle differences in relative peak height and shape that you may get comparing batches of a multi-domain protein. So this actually makes a DSC more sensitive to changes in higher order structure than it has been up to now. It's not that the information wasn't there, but now we are providing a tool for you to extract that information and to be able to compare your batches and your biosimilar to innovator using this tool, which allows you also to set pass-fail criteria. So you can be very sort of robust in that decision making, and demonstrably robust. And then once you've done these comparisons, I mean, if you're at one site now, you've got the compliance. If you're doing a batch-to-batch analysis, you can compare the data generated at one site. You can actually transfer the method, the protocol used to do the experiment, but also the analysis method to another site to make sure that everything you've done is absolutely identical between departments and sites. And I think this will make your ability to demonstrate your robustness of your own systems to the regulatory groups will become that much simpler, and make that submitting of documents for regulatory approval that much easier. Just a little bit more detail here. Again, just reminding you of the simultaneous fitting. All these data sets you can see here are fit simultaneously, so that they're all analyzed in exactly the same way. And again, that analysis can be transferred. Here's an output you might see when you do your comparability studies. So on the top left-hand panel, you see a run, in this case the NISMAB run a number of times, and you can compare how identical or how similar that data sets are. In the columns you can't really see on this slide, but on there is a tool there which shows how different the TMs are and the enthalpies, but also this shape analysis tool that we're newly introducing. It was very powerful, which you can use to set pass-fail criteria for your comparability work. Now, this is not one of the four cornerstones. This is something in addition. If it didn't sound ambiguous, this is a fifth cornerstone. If you can imagine a strange-looking building. Anyway, I just want to announce this. This is something that will be coming soon. It will be on the product in a few months. It's not ready yet, but I just wanted to use this ability, this opportunity to tell you about this new exciting feature. So now the instrument will be able to run samples of very high concentrations, up to 300 mg per ml. And this will allow you to test your formulations at biotherapeutic concentrations, just to make sure you don't get any false positives. There might be buffer solutions that that stabilize your proteins at low concentrations, but perhaps there's a concentration dependence to that stabilizing phenomena that may make it less effective at biotherapeutic concentration. In addition, manufacturing now can use this DSC to actually test for critical to quality attributes. The ability to do these PEAQ Smart and PEAQ Compare algorithms analyses coupled with your ability to show 21 CFR Part 11 compliance means that this tool can now sit very happily in that manufacturing environment. And I'm sure you will find lots of good uses for that. Here is some data just to show what can happen as a function of sample concentration. This is just BSA, but the purpose behind the slide is just to show you that at one concentration, at 5 mg per mil here, you see that this batch of BSA has a TM around 63 degrees and it has 2 or 3 subdomains. However, when run at 300 mg per mil, the TM actually increases enormously to above 80 degrees. And again, this would be, I guess, in your hands would be very valuable if you found a buffer solution or a protein system that was further stabilized by being at high concentrations. However, conversely, the opposite could be true, and you may find that something your systems are less stable at the biotherapeutic concentration. So now you have the ability to check your formulations at these concentrations, and I hope you find that very valuable. So I just want to go through a few examples just to sort of drive home where I think the advantages are in the various application areas in which you work. And I'll start off by giving an example of how the MicroCal PEAQ-DSC could improve your productivity in the candidate selection domain. So with the improved cleaning routines and the reference checker making you very confident of the performance of the instrument, you can now run sort of back-to-back runs without many cleaning or buffer checking runs. For those of you who are unused to using the instrument, it won't mean as much as it does to those of you who have some experience with it. But when I visited customers, I find that oftentimes people will run 4 or 5 measurements for 1 TM. So there'll be a detergent run, a buffer run, just to make sure everything's okay. With the new reference checker and the cleaning protocols, you can run back-to-back proteins. And this particular example, I think, has increased productivity by about 4-fold over standard currently used protocols. And in this example, 56 TMs were obtained from an overall 64 runs. So we have 8 here, which were some checks and some references. But in 2 days, we managed to get 56 TMs. And each TM, including dead volume and all that wastage that goes with any technique, it cost 18 micrograms per system. So there is this, again, when I visit customers, I find that many people use 200 or 300 micrograms of protein, but this is really an opportunity for me to show you that you can get very good data with a lot less sample than perhaps you're perhaps used to using. Certainly in this area of candidate selection, where you really want to quickly get through lots of your candidates and get high quality data. We find that many people in this space use spectroscopic techniques because they do have a higher throughput and a lower sample consumption. But often with those spectroscopic techniques, as I demonstrated earlier, you don't always see all the domains and all the detail that you get with a DSC. And in this case, for instance, this small domain at 70 degrees, the first one, may not be observed in certain technologies. So with this increase in productivity and the reduction in sample consumption, I hope that many of you might find it, you can use it earlier in your candidate selection experiments. And also this ability to do it earlier instead of some of the other technologies means that you'll spend less time doing validation, which I know that many of you do with your DSC. You could use the DSC more holistically through this process. And right, so here's an example in formulations. So as a rule of thumb, I've talked about the automatic analysis, and we found that samples above about ½ mg per mil will often be very accurately analysed without any hands-on user input subjectivity. These thermograms are analysed completely by the software without any input. So that speed of analysis and that lack of subjectivity is very powerful here. And so I think in formulation studies, I realize that many of you will need to run a sample and a buffer because of the changing conditions. But even in these situations, with the cleaning and the reference checking device, you could probably increase your productivity by about twofold. So you'll get a useful TM from every second measurement, rather than the 4 or 5 that you may be doing now. One other interesting aside on this is that when these formulations were first analyzing using a spectroscopic technique, you may notice this small peak at 55 degrees. That was undetected by those techniques, and the wrong optimal formulation was chosen. It wasn't until the DSC was performed, this low temperature domain was spotted, and the conditions that promoted that peak were less stabilizing than were previously considered. This example is of an avastin protein at various pHs. But hopefully you can see some of the value there in not only removing false positives, but in increasing your productivity if you use the instrument in this space. We also here have an example of how DSC is used in manufacturing support. And one of the frustrations, I guess, for me often is that I see lots of beautiful data showing how DSC has been very good at picking up deterioration in a protein sample, and has often been found to be that the strongest technique for looking at even very small changes in higher order structure. The example here is from an oxidation of a single amino acid, and that actually demonstrated changes in a very small, subtle pre-transition that you can see here. So this was very powerful in that manufacturing support group. There are other examples. There's 2 papers here that you can refer to that will actually demonstrate how it was used. But now the beauty for me is that we can actually transfer these methods of quality control directly into manufacturing. Now that we have the peak compliance features, we can save time not only having to develop another assay that is GXP compliant, so all that method development that goes into that, and we can just transfer this method directly into manufacturing because we have GXP compliance, but we also have those other tools that I mentioned, SMART and Peak Compare, which allow us to maintain a consistency from site to site and from department to department, making sure that we have a very robust means for making sure that the higher order structure of our biotherapeutic is maintained through process change or just from batch to batch comparisons. And this slide is really just trying to help me drive that message home of transferability. So we can transfer data analysis and protocols from all the way up the pipeline, from candidate selection and formulations, process development, but now we can take it into manufacturing. And perhaps for many of you, one of the very important feature will be that you can compare your higher order structure of your protein when you manufacture your protein or your biotherapeutic at many different sites, geographically separated. You can send an email with the analysis protocol and the experimental setup and make sure that you have exact repetition or comparability of the data amongst sites that are geographically far apart. And here's just an example. Again, it sort of highlights what I think will be valuable to you, and also some of my frustration, I guess. I mean, here's an example from a few years ago where people were actually using data to compare lots from various manufacturing sites that this company used, but it only could be used to give them confidence and not actually used formally in their critical to quality attribute testing processes. And so now with this new PEAQ-DSC, this method would not only be giving people confidence internally, but could be used to measure and monitor CTQs inline, which also can be used for submitting to the regulatory bodies as well, just to give everyone confidence that your higher order structure is being maintained, because we have that high data integrity that this instrument now provides. Here's just an example, again, to show you how this might be used in the biosimilarity space. As many of you will be aware, there are a number of biosimilar drugs out there now that have used DSC in their biosimilarity submissions. There's a list of examples here. We have biosimilar for Amgen, we have Benepali for Enbrel, and we have Remsima for Remicade. The example I've shown here is actually work we did with a collaborator, and they were comparing the Neupogen, which was the innovator, with Zarzio, the biosimilar. And they showed by their DSC traces that they were very, very similar. And these, the numbers you see in the table on the right, give very high similarity values, and this team were able to move forward confidently, knowing that their biosimilar was indeed similar to the innovator. So to sum up, we have a list of features here. We have PEAQ Performance, PEAQ Smart, and these two features I think are very important, certainly in the earlier stages in the pipeline, in candidate selection and formulations and process development. These allow for increased productivity. They allow the DSC to be used perhaps further upstream than previously used because of the reference checker, the optimal cleaning. But also, hopefully, I've shown you that perhaps the instrument uses less protein than perhaps you previously had thought. And then in addition to these features, we have PEAQ Compare and PEAQ Compliance that I think are going to bring real value to those of you working in the latter half of that development pipeline. This transferability of data, the quantitative tools for comparing samples, the ability to more sensitively pick up changes in higher order structure. And that coupled with the PEAQ Compliance, allowing this method to migrate into manufacturing, again reducing development costs where new methods have to be produced, and as a method that actually can be used inline for measuring critical to quality attributes. I'm going to see there's going to be a few raised eyebrows out there, and this is my attempt to try and demonstrate the sort of the value that this technology will bring you. I know that many of you out there will be, I hope anyway, excited by the technology, but you will have to justify to yourselves and to your managers and to your peers that the value in bringing such an instrument into your department or into your company. So you will see here some assumptions I've made. In candidate selection and formulations and process development, the idea that this increase in productivity, I'm trying to estimate on a per project level, could probably save 2 people between you working for a couple of weeks trying to sort out, increasing your productivity might give you 1 man-week advantage. The whole idea of false positives, I mean, I've tried to be conservative here. Obviously, if you have a false positive, you have a candidate or a formulation that's not as good as you thought, that may have lots of repercussions downstream. But even very conservatively, within your own group, if you work in this space, you might spend between a couple of you, a few days each. So trying to sort that problem out. So I've given that, assuming a saving of 1 man week. And then also removing an additional experimental or analytical step because of the idea that you can run samples, more samples and quickly, again, could save you another man week. And you can see that each of those, I'm assuming a man week costs about $3,000 to your business. So that's $150,000 a year, and that's sort of fully loaded, including benefits and salary. You may want to adjust that or disagree with it, but these are the assumptions I'm making. So for 20 projects a year, if each of these things saves us a man week, that's $180,000 in which you would save a year. I think the savings are even greater in manufacturing and biosimilarity in manufacturing, where I'm estimating method development costs may cost you about 4 man weeks. The increase in productivity is going to give you a couple of man weeks. And also, I think we need to look at that robustness of your submissions to the regulatory agencies. If you can do that process quicker and have less iterations on that, I'm assuming that could save you up to about 4 man weeks. So, again, I know that you may or may disagree with some of these numbers, and I'd actually be very interested to hear where you think I've either got it right or got it wrong, and I'd be very grateful for that. But I think the savings there could be up to in the area of $500,000 a year, and I hope that would give you some sort of energy or some ability to convince your peers of how valuable this technology could be in your workspace. I've also thrown out a less conservative one just for you to think about, and this idea that if your product generates $1.5 billion a year in sales, which is actually 10 times less than Humira, for instance. So this is a sort of a small blockbuster, for want of a better term. And making some assumptions about the number of selling days, that would generate $7.5 million in revenue a day. Or if conservatively at that end of a process, that's probably, I'm guessing, although I don't know your financials, it could be about $1.5 million a day in profit. Once, there's obviously all these expenses that need to be included. I know that's not bottom line for you, but the point being, if this instrument can get you to market 1 day earlier than you would have done without it, it would take about an hour for this instrument's contribution to pay for itself. And I think with all the features here, it's quite conceivable that time on the market, before your intellectual property, your IP runs out, even an extra day out there in an uncompetitive environment would provide you lots of additional revenue. So again, that might be a bit maybe forward of me to put this out there, but I wanted to throw it out there for you to consider, and I'd love to speak to some of you actually about this to see whether you think this is a sensible way of thinking about it. So these are the summation of that. That the compliance and compare maybe could save you about $500,000 a year. PEAQ Smart I think feeds into the other 3 areas, so it's more difficult rather for me to quantify. And if you only use it at the very early stages of candidate selection, I think the productivity value could be worth about $180,000 a year. This is all assuming 20 projects a year. Some of you may do less projects than this a year, but I think many of you will do many more. So hopefully that gives you a sort of a feel for the value that this instrument can bring. So, in summary, we can now provide you high data integrity with the 21 CFR Part 11, where you can increase your productivity for those of you who have an instrument already. You can use the gold standard technique earlier in the process. You can there's tools in there now that will help you demonstrate fit for purpose, so that when you're discussing with your managers and or submitting to regulatory agencies, there are certain features that will support the robustness of your data. We have this increased transferability of knowledge, so you can have your experts helping the non-experts in your organizations to generate data in a non-subjective, robust way. Hopefully it will save those people some time as well, both sets of people, allowing you to increase your productivity. And also the new tools around biosimilarity for biocomparability submission. So that the pass-fail biocomparability tool, I think, should add a lot of robustness and sensitivity to your higher order structure monitoring. And now it can be used directly in manufacturing, which I hope you find an exciting proposition. All these features combined together, I think, really show that this is a DSC built for the biopharmaceutical industry and the regulated environment. And indeed, I think it's actually the protein stability assay platform for that industry. And with that, I will finish up and pass you back to Tarek. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. You can see here's my contact details if you want to email me any other questions that you might have. But I thank you very much for your time. I hope you're as excited by the project and the instrument as I am, and I look forward to hearing your questions. And so thank you, Tarek. I'll pass over to you now.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder for the audience, we are about to enter our Q&A session to end the webinar here. So in order to ask questions, if you haven't already, you can send them in via the questions widget. So just type them into the box at the top left-hand corner of your screen and click submit. And we're going to try to get to as many of these as we have time for now. So here is one of the questions that's already come in. This one is, what is the difference between the PEAQ and VP-CAP-DSC? They look the same as far as I can see from the advertisement video.
Okay, so the difference between the CAP and the VP-DSC, is that right, Tarek?
Yeah, I believe that's what the person asked, yep.
So the VP-DSC is a lollipop shape. So it's when proteins aggregate in that type of cell, it can disturb the thermogram in a different way to the capillary shaped DSC. The reason being is that the lollipop shape relies on convection for the transfer of heat across to the sensors. As the protein aggregates, those convection currents are very disturbed by dropping effectively a solid through a convection current, which can does have an impact on the output of the data. However, in the capillary-shaped DSC, the transfer of heat from the sample is more reliant on conduction. So there's the transfer of heat it's a larger volume, larger surface area to volume ratio. So conduction is the most important element there, and so the aggregation phenomena has less of a disturbance to the output thermograms.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next question here. We have a question here that says, we have 4-year-old VP-CAP Auto DSC with Origin Lab Analysis software. Is it possible to upgrade it to your new software?
So the auto sampler has changed. There is a lot of difference in the hardware. There are improvements around EMC, EMI, and serviceability within the instrument itself. So it's quite a different device. And so it's in terms of software upgrade, if that was the question, that's not possible. You need to buy the whole system as a whole. If you're talking about holistically as the whole, can it be upgraded, then you need to talk to your local your sales teams about that.
Okay, lovely. Keep those questions coming in, everybody. We've had some great ones come in so far. This one is, are the cells similar than in capillary VP-DSC?
Yes, they are. They are. So a lot of the features that you've seen me talking about are the delivery of the system to the cell and the analysis and control of the analysis post-run. But the guts of the instrument are very similar to the VP capillary cell that you have now.
Lovely. Moving on to the next question here. The samples up to 300 milligram per milliliter are measured in the same sample cell of DSC? Do you have an answer for that one?
Yes. So there are some. The person there clearly may have tried something like this before. So we have a technique which, as I said, it's not out now. So I want to be a little bit careful about how I talk about it. But there is a means of getting in a smaller amount into a smaller volume into the calorimeter, so that we can remove any aggregated plug that might occur in a simpler and automated way. So these high concentration runs can be done without any kind of user input. So yeah, completely automated.
Okay, perfect. Do keep those questions coming in. We will have time for a couple more here. This question is, I have just realized that the sample can be analyzed at therapeutic concentration. Which is the maximum working concentration?
I mean, at the moment, the maximum we've tested is 300 mg per mil, and it works very well with that.
All right, lovely. Going on to this question here, regarding performance qualification and 21 CFR compliance, why is it been put into user end?
So why has it been put at the user end?
I believe that's what the question asks, yeah.
So I think if I understand the question correctly, there's to be compliant and to have all the features that make data high integrity, there are internal organizations need to have a quality system that's auditable and can be controlled and monitored. So there is a responsibility with the user to actually make sure that they're following their own rules. What we provide is a tool that allows them to manage and audit their own people, and so we provide a tool that should be able to fit neatly into someone's quality system. We will not be the weakness. We can show that our data is of high integrity. Anyone, once they've got that data, can do whatever they wish with it. But from our end, we will provide data with high integrity, but it does have to fit into a robust quality system of the user's own.
Okay, thank you very much. And that does bring us to the end of our Q&A session. I'm afraid we have no more time for questions. Thank you to everybody who did submit a question. We had way too many to get to today. So those will be forwarded on to Malvern later, so you can expect some kind of email response later. So thank you very much. Just leaves me to thank Ronan for what was a great presentation and to thank Malvern Instruments for sponsoring this session. If you would like to get in touch with Ronan, his email address is ronan.o'brien@malvern.com. Go ahead and get in touch with him there. Once this webinar ends, a survey will appear in its place. We'd like you to stick around and fill in that survey for us for feedback. We'd really appreciate it. To the attendees, you will receive an email shortly, and that will tell you how you can access the on-demand version of the webinar. If you'd like to watch again, you can access it as well through our website, which is www.business-review-webinars.com, and we do look forward to sharing further webinars with you. Please keep an eye out on that website. Follow us on Twitter at BRWebinars for daily updates, and of course you can join our LinkedIn group as well, Business Review Webinars. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you all have a great day.